good. All right, y'all. We are back in the building. Good morning to everybody that's here on this Friday Eve. Hopefully y'all are doing well. Happy Thursday to you guys. We got a great conversation lined up for you today. I know you saw the thumbnail. We are going to be talking with Mr. Charles Rambo about a lot of the stuff that's been going on here in Fulton County, specifically this $1.3 billion bill that the taxpayers of Fulton County are about to pay, including myself and a lot of us. So we'll get into that. We're also going to talk about a lot of other topics as well. So make sure you guys stay locked in and ready. If you have any thoughts or questions, please make sure y'all drop them in the chat. We will be looking at and keeping track of your thoughts and comments during and throughout the interview as well. Also, I got to say what's up to the amazing people who are in the building, the ones who make this show the amazing place that it is. Shout out to my beautiful, awesome, amazing Amy E is in here. Y'all know what she does. Be amazing. So shout out to Amy. Thank you for being here and everything that you do behind the scenes as well. If y'all don't follow Amy on X, make sure you do that. Go follow her at @AmyLee on X. She's been up to date on a lot of the stuff we cover here on the show, including topics that we don't cover on the show. So if you want to stay up to date on the latest news, make sure you go follow her over there. We got Taco Tuesday in here as well. Good to see you, my friend. And we're going to go ahead and get right into it. Before we do, you guys know I have one favor to ask you, and it's pretty easy to do, and that's to like the video. Likes are free, helps the channel continue to grow, and let the algorithm know you guys are enjoying the show. It shares the video, the channel, this live stream you're watching right now with more people. So thank you to everyone that's liked the video so far. If you're feeling extra generous, you can share the video as well. You can share it to any social media platform you're on, and even via text message. And last but not least, I'll be reading super chats at the end of the show. So thank you to everybody who goes the extra mile and sends in those super chats as well. All right, I'm not going to make you guys wait any longer. Let's go ahead and get our esteemed guest up here. Y'all, please give a big round of applause to our returning guest as well. Mr. Charles Rambo is in the building. Good morning, sir. Thank you for being here.
Good morning, and thank you for having me back.
Absolutely.
If I could just do a quick shout out real quick. You had two persons from your esteemed audience. The last interview that you did just had my Facebook friends, everybody cracking up. They did a comparison of me to, in image at least, to Uncle Junior.
Yeah,
on the
Uncle
Sopranos.
Junior.
Right. I don't know whether that was in demeanor or just looks, but we definitely did look alike. So I've never watched The Sopranos a day in my life, but that was a very interesting insight.
That's
so
hilarious. Shout out to the community, man, showing love, and they've enjoyed the interview so much through all the laughs and the great conversation. So it's an honor, and I'm glad to have you back on the show, of course.
Yes, sir.
All right, we've got a lot to talk about, Mr. Rambo. Specifically, we're going to go ahead and get into it. The Board of Commissioners, they just came out and they approved the $1.3 billion amount, this $1 billion fund, to not only build this new 1,800 capacity facility, but also renovate the Fulton County Rice Street Jail. I just want to know your initial thoughts on this, and specifically as to the status of where Rice Street is right now and how this is going to impact that.
So we have to go back and look at the 2024 race for Fulton Sheriff, of which I participated in some of the debates in the primary section, debates. And I was adamantly not against building a new facility. I was adamant against building a 5,000 bed facility. I was the only one that boldly and adamantly called out that this was going to be the second wave of mass incarceration, particular of Black men and inside of Fulton County. It's not something I've seen on the wire. This isn't something I saw or heard from, some government report. This is what I actually saw from 1989 when I first started and we opened 901 Rice Street during the crack epidemic era, where we had almost 3,500 to 4,000 people on top of one another. And at the end of the day, and I promise I'm gonna try not to use that too many times, what happened was it's a slow moving criminal justice system. Overcrowding is not the problem in itself. Jails would get overcrowded. It's the conditions that it creates in cruel and unusual punishment when there's no internal order and discipline there. So when you look at jail overcrowding and the need to build bed spaces, you really have to come back and look at the slow moving criminal justice system and ask, how come we cannot move these cases, speedy trial, arraignments, or what have you, to get through getting these inmates their justice in court, but also saving the taxpayers' dollars on having to build a new facility. So
Right.
I've heard Rob Pitts here recently, and even Marvin Arrington, that had kind of like repeated what I said so boldly. If you build it, who do you think is going to fill it up? That
Right.
should not be offensive to anybody that's listening when you look at the fact that there are 95% black males inside of the facility. So, what the hell is going on that now you want to consider, or someone has sent you a proposal for $500 million for privatization to bring those inmates to them? Now,
Right.
you want to particularly be talking about persons who have not even been convicted, going across state lines. Now you're going back to visiting issues of no opportunities to get to visits with the families, but most important, it puts a hardship on trying to get those persons to court. So it outside of just the facility itself, I'll go deeper. You've got to also consider the cost of outsourcing inmates, even if you did that in the metro county area,
Right.
such as when we were dealing with Hall County, Oconee County, a couple of other counties back, in 2009, 2016. Um, that came at a pretty decent that came at a big cost. So imagine now you got to displace a whole bunch of inmates, thousands of them, all across the state, and you are still, as the sheriff, responsible for ensuring that they have the abilities to get to court. So the price tag itself, $1.3 billion. I'm not telling you I agree with it, but it's understandable looking at the dilapidation of the building. But building a 5,000 bed space, I've got to question the mentality of the Board of Commissioners as well as the sheriff who brought these things up well before this time period that they're now trying to resurface it.
Yeah, absolutely. And as we talked about yesterday with Jeremy from the Bail Project, this is a jail. This isn't a prison. This isn't a long-term detainment facility. So you have this situation to where we're going through and you're increasing the capacity, as you say, which essentially says to me, the DA's office, the Board of Commissioners, even the sheriff office saying, look, we're going to keep doing what we're doing. Y'all just find a place to put these people. And that to me is alarming in the sense that if we're going to go to 5,000, what's going to stop us from having a 10,000 person jail? What's going to stop us from it going to 15? Go ahead.
Well, keep in mind that we are in the era of where bed spaces are being a high commodity for other facilities and jurisdictions that cannot handle their overcrowding. So what you will find is that you have other jurisdictions sending their inmates to us because just like we did with DeKalb County, they built
Right.
a facility with population growth in mind, and we were able to send some of our inmates over there to help out with the overcrowding. But now, when you talk about 5,000 bed facility, um, again, I have to come back and ask, where is? Please, no one in the audience, do not get offended for what I'm getting ready to say. You don't find anybody else's jurisdiction that is experiencing these type of problems in their judicial system other than Fulton County. You don't
Right.
hear Cobb County experiencing these issues trying to balance overcrowding and caseloads or what have you. You don't hear about this um, anywhere else, but you hear about it primarily inside of a county that is predominantly black, filled with black males. And they sit around and do not get me wrong. And I'm going to call it out, and I know I'm going to get cussed out in the chat. Keep your ass out of jail. Please find something else productive to do with your life before someone is dictating you how you're going to spend that time. How much per diem is going to take for you to wear a blue uniform when you could be out here in a construction uniform, a blue suit, or something, making something more productive of your life? So we're not going to just put it all just on the criminal justice system. There's got to be some personal accountability in terms of how we're governing our lives to stay the hell up out of Rice Street.
Yeah. And I will want to speak to that. And I agree 1000% because, in general, law abiding citizens usually have a pretty high chance of staying out of jail. Right. And I want to look specifically at, we can talk about the district attorney's office and the sheriff office, but when it comes to how things are being run and managed and the policies and staffing in general, it seems like that's something that wasn't really addressed throughout this entire conversation with the Board of Commissions. And that seems to be a major issue.
It's a major issue is because you got too many people trying to play politics with, as you said, the personnel issues.
Yeah.
First and foremost, the audience should come to understand that 1516-10, the official code of Georgia, specifically enumerates the duties of a sheriff along with other statutory duties. These are already laws codified of how the job is supposed to be performed. There's no Democratic way, there's no Republican way, there's no independent, there's no other way of doing the job other than how OCGA says it. There's also a provision that says is that the sheriff, so I've heard a young lady come down there to the Board of Commissioners meeting saying that, it's not the sheriff's responsibility for hiring. That's crap.
I heard that too. And I said the same thing. That is not true at all.
If I could, I have to go back because I get so many laws, but there's one that specifically says that the sheriff is responsible for the maintenance of his workforce in terms of hiring of that workforce, as well as the training of them. What has happened, and here's where we're going to go deep into that particular problem. You have what's known as merit system employment as well as at-will employment, particularly for sheriff's offices. Very few sheriff's offices in the state operate under a county's merit system, which essentially gives an employee due process rights, procedural due process rights in the event that there is a termination, a suspension, gives them property interest in their jobs. That only can come from the county. It doesn't come from the sheriff because most sheriffs have the clause that gives them the ability for their employees to serve at their pleasure.
Right.
So what you have is that particularly your metro county governments that have put into place that have allowed for sheriff deputies to fall up under their merit system. So now this gives the counties some assumption that they now control, who can come in. Well, I say who can come in, how many positions that a sheriff can get within inside of his budget cycle. That is absolute lie. You have case law such as Chafin versus Calhoun that talks about budget issues and that the Board of Commissioners cannot control the operations of a sheriff's office. But in Fulton County, and I'm going to give Pat just a little bit of leeway, this goes all the way back to the days of Leroy Stinchcomb, just as the merit system became popular for deputies, is that the Board of Commissioners have historically tried to control the sheriff's office by saying, here's how many people based upon our budget forecast that you can have. So I remember looking at the I can't say deployment, the allocation sheet and saying that we could only have 10 patrol positions, but you can have 65 jail positions. Well, again, that's not the commissioner's job to do that.
Right.
So we had been fighting for years, coming from up out of that under, I remember the case. We had fought when I was union president against the Board of Commissioners, even trying to define our roles, our duties, and our job descriptions. And we were able to successfully get the sheriff to recognize that there were key positions that the Board of Commissioners had no business trying to tell us in terms of what we needed in order to operate constitutionally. And Rob Pitts, if you're listening, this all comes back to your plan, This is your plan in terms of really where you would love to see for the sheriff's office to be either abolished or come up under the control of the Fulton County Board of Commissioners. That's not Charles Rambo speaking. You can go back and look at your own Blue Ribbon Commission study where you were behind that. So I'm not speaking into something, out of the clear blue sky. This has all been a guise over the years of trying to get rid of or bring the sheriff's office under the control of the Board of Commissioners.
Well, what are your thoughts on that? Say that were to happen and some of that were to move forward, because I think that gets lost a lot in the conversation. We talk about the money and we talk about the budget and not really looking forward as to what's happening with the Board of Commissioners and the way they want to move forward. What would be your thoughts on that as far as the share?
Under the Blue Ribbon Commission study, I was the lone voice that came to the state capitol during that hearing and laid down, just like we're talking now, except for I brought a white paper study, and it was credited by AJC as well as some other outlets because I came and spoke very specific, forcefully. In fact, the room was filled with sheriffs from across the state. They were not necessarily concerned about Fulton County. What they were concerned about is that if you do it to one sheriff's office in the state, you will try and do it to the others.
Right.
So we had the Georgia Sheriff's Association and the the president of the Georgia Sheriff's Association that was present. And when I gave my presentation, the committee asked, are there any other questions from any of the sheriffs in the room? One of the guys raised up his hand and said, no, Mr. Rambo said it all. So that right there was enough that put some brakes on what they trying to do to try to get rid of the sheriff's office, because they could have done it back then if there was no strong leadership that had stepped up. I was just a mere lieutenant and a union president that stepped up to the plate. The budget issue comes back down to the Board of Commissioners, getting this back on track with the jail and just showing it's a whole big history behind it.
Yeah.
Since 1989, when they opened that piece of crap of 901 Rice Street, it was to fulfill the requirements of what was known as Fambro versus Fulton County, which took us away from the 1165 Jefferson Street facility and put us in the 901 Rice Street facility. They were under a time frame and constraint because they were trying to beat the clock on the federal consent decree order before the judge would have came in and did a federal receivership of it. Since then, in 89, when we opened the place, we established internal order and discipline with inside of that, but that could not control the locks that were falling apart. These were brand new locks. These were, the facility itself is built on a landfill, but let's keep that in mind. It's built on a landfill that the facility was already beginning to sink and settle, and you could see a crack right down the middle of the facility.
My goodness.
So the Board of Commissioners have always been, and I say it very matter-of-factly, can be checked in the same environment that I made my statement. They have been very negligent about fixing the jail because they felt that they poured all this money into this $535 million jail, and they were not going to do anything else towards it until it started falling apart. Well, let me give you one particular example. The issue of locks at the jail, what happened was they got these parts, they got these companies to come in and to build the facility, but when it came time to fulfill a warranty on some of the parts that were missing, broken, or malfunctioning, those companies had gone out of business or did not have any long-lasting manufacturer warranties to cover those particular parts.
Oh, wow.
So the Board of Commissioners never would fulfill their responsibility under law that says is that they are responsible for the erection, for the building, for the new construction of all facilities to include a jail. They never would fix the locks until in the Jackson administration, when I started CompStat, the chief jailer came to me, and this is a story that's still online today.
Mm-hmm.
He came to me and he said, listen, I have gone down here. We've been down here to the Board of Commissioners for the past 20 something years trying to get these damn locks fixed. He said, and I've gone down and they essentially are going to vote it down. Can you pull whatever magic, whatever anointing that you got, what have you, you know, do what you need to do and come up with some information that I could give to, at that time, the late Emma Darnell.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Emma Darnell is was a very staunch, astute county commissioner, and she would tell you up front if it didn't have anything to do with children and old people, she didn't want to hear nothing about the jail or anything dealing with criminal justice issues.
Right.
What happened, I put together this white paper study and I pulled together all the pictures, all the incident reports. It was about a 25-page white paper study, but I did verifiable consequences and verifiable benefits that if you don't fix these locks, this will no longer be on the sheriff's office. This will be squarely upon you as the Board of Commissioners because we put you on constructive notice about this facility. Emma came back and changed her mind real quick, and that was the swing vote that got us the monies that were needed to fix the locks. So until you bust the Board of Commissioners across the head with law or a federal consent decree, they're not going to budge.
Yeah. And I want to talk a little bit too, speaking of that, about some of the work that you did, CompStat specifically, and moving into this new 1,800 capacity facility that I guess they're deeming a mental health facility. You mentioned and you talked about staying out of jail, which I agree with wholeheartedly. As someone who's a law-abiding citizen, that's the simplest way to beat this process in a lot of cases. But if you look at Fulton County Jail specifically, we've seen so many cases, LaShawn Thompson specifically, where people who have had some major mental health issues and have just been put in the wrong place and become a victim of being in jail. Even cases we could talk about recently that happened. So I want to talk about moving into this new facility. What are some of the things that will need to be done to help manage that? From the standpoint of making sure that people don't become a victim of just the bad policies and the way the jail is run currently.
So let's see if we can unpack that because there's so many components.
Yeah.
One of the duties that I had as a supervisor was supervising deputies who took into custody mentally ill persons,
Mm-hmm.
either taking them to Georgia Regional, GMHI, so forth, so on. And it wasn't to take them to jail, it was to take them to treatment.
Right.
So unfortunately, today what we have is the county jail all across America has become the drop-off point for persons with mental illness that otherwise should be going to a mental health facility for treatment.
Right.
But what happened was they started closing down so many of the state-funded or the locally funded hospitals, like I said, Georgia Mental Health Institute, so forth, so on. The only one that's open really is Georgia Regional Hospital. They too get overcrowded because now you're bringing in probably 5 or 6 county worth of persons who are either substance abuse or have mental illness. And what they do, they bring them in and put them out on an outpatient and send them right back out into the community. Well, what does that do? That puts them back into a position where, they're going to commit some quality of life crime, and that's what's going to wind them up inside of jail. We have a mental health crisis in terms of how jails are now becoming the new facility for locking up mentally ill persons.
That's sad.
Well, it's not only just sad, but they sit around the jail for long periods of time for things such as disorderly conduct, urinating in the public,
Right.
something that otherwise could be put into what the current commission, and I applaud them for it, but the jurisdictions, and I hope that they're listening, it's not your option in terms of using the diversion center. It is not the citizens' option to say, well, I want to see this person go to jail. I want to see this person go to here. That's not your option. When law enforcement responds, it is up to the law enforcement officer to process the case in the direction that it should go, and whether that's taking them to jail for a crime that has been committed, or with the caveat of saying, here's the person that's mentally ill, let's at least put them into the diversion center. They say they can't even get people into the diversion center because right now, locking people up is more sexier than getting them some damn help.
Oh yeah, and I mean we can talk about the district attorney's stat padding and just wanted to make her resume look good. And honestly, it's sad to see the lack of work that has been done together from the sheriff's department and the DA's office, because I can imagine if we were to ask the DA's office about this, they'd probably throw up their hands and just say, hey, my job isn't to get these people mental health. Our job is to make sure these people are charged if they need to be charged and handle it that way. So that's on the sheriff's department. Then we have the sheriff's department. Where's the training and where is the accountability there when it comes to how these people are put in the right positions in the right places to where they can actually get help or be incarcerated because they committed a crime?
Well, it becomes very expensive as well because at the time that we were dealing with the
Right.
overpopulation of persons with mental illness, we were also dealing with, and I know some people are going to get angry, but I mean, the facts are the facts. We had another consent decree order that we were dealing with called Foster versus Fulton County. And when Judge Marvin Shube came out to the jail to see, what was really going on, he got the inmates in the medical unit who were diagnosed with HIV got his attention and said, hey, we're not getting our rights as well. So we had to come in and to totally reestablish internal order and discipline on these areas that had a mixture of persons who were HIV positive, that were mentally ill, acute illnesses or what have you. And what we found out that a lot of people were coming in, particular for the HIV, was because they could not afford the medications on the street. Hear me where I'm going. They could not afford the medications on the street. So what do? You commit a low-level crime, just enough to get you on the inside, because what was worked out with the courts was that, hey, what we'll do when you are released, we're going to give you at least 2 weeks supply upon release of medications to treat HIV. Well, what do? You see that person becoming a repeat offender.
Right.
Now, they weren't able to get them the high-end pharmaceutical drugs, but even the generic form of HIV medication at that time was very expensive. So, I mean, there's so many money-making avenues that I heard someone say the other day, particularly when you're dealing with healthcare, mental or physical healthcare, that really turns into big bucks. So who really benefits from the mass incarceration of these bodies inside of jail that they can't get into court, but you sure as hell can get them inside of your pockets and inside of your dividends?
Yeah, and you mentioned to me earlier off camera about the shift that you've been able to see and track from where funding was going from Grady specifically being one of the most funded areas in Fulton County. Now we're actually seeing that shift over to a lot of that funding is going towards the jail. Why? Maybe, and it could be in a lot of cases, because this jail is being used and treated as a mental health facility, which is disturbing to see, to say the least.
Well, not just a mental health facility, it's just becoming a dumping ground for, I know this is a family show. I just said it's become a dumping ground for bullshit cases.
Yeah.
And that's the reason. Let me qualify that. I qualify that is that if you went and you looked at the average case inside of the jail, whether it be a misdemeanor or felony, and I'm not calling out the district attorney on this, what have you, other than the fact that if you see on the front end that you don't have the weight to move forward with this case, you got to have the courage to call these local jurisdictions and say, you got to stop sending these crappy cases over to us, because otherwise we're going to continue to dismiss them.
Right.
I guarantee you, the same way that they're talking about, bail, of getting somebody out who only had a $15 or $25 bond. If you put those same persons, their cases up against some of these real judges, they would dismiss them almost immediately on first appearance.
Right.
So that's the easiest way to inmate population control, as well as a constraint on the criminal justice system as a whole. Do not send these crappy cases to us that otherwise keeps people languished on the floors, overcrowding. I remember, Eric, that we went back to eventually not just having to double bunk, but now having to triple bunk inmates, not only just double bunk and triple bunk, but now also having to put them on what we call boats and pallets, 25 to 30 boats in the day room,
Right.
all because of the mass incarceration, particularly during the crack cocaine epidemic that took, every city by by storm. But again, these were the overpopulating conditions that our county commission did not want to deal with, because if they can't control the sheriff's office, then underfund it, let it self-destruct. But then again, that depends upon the mentality of the elected sheriff as well.
Yeah, and speaking to these crappy cases you mentioned, it doesn't seem like to me that there isn't an, or it doesn't seem like there is an incentive for the DA's office to not indict these cases, because again, that's gonna look good on them if they're indicting these cases and these charges are going through. Maybe they can mention that someone has a history of mental illness. I don't know how they handle those indictments, but it seems like if it gets to that point to where these people are being brought in and taken into Rice Street, and then the case is getting handed to the DA's office, that the sheriff office has really a lot of a responsibility to make sure that these people are getting the proper, or getting placed in the proper location, because no one else is gonna look after that.
Well, this was one of the things that I did with our CompStat unit. It wasn't just, we knew who the mentally ill persons were that were on the medical floor, but we had a few that were scattered here and there into general population.
Mm-hmm.
So if we determined that the person was mentally ill and they were posing a problem, what we would do, we would refer them by 1013 to Georgia Regional. We would refer them to Georgia Regional. It would be a quick turnaround, but
Right.
nonetheless, that would force the jail administrators to come. I'm sorry, not the jail administrator. It would force the medical service provider to make sure that this person is now classified in the right unit. Now, this is going to sound like a stretch, related but unrelated. That was one of the ways that we were also able to radically cut down on the masturbation the inmates were doing openly and in the presence of nurses, female staff, what have you. I mean, they would openly just stand right there in the middle of the day room and just start just masturbating away, because they say, I got to get mines off, man. The hell with y'all, blah blah. So what I did was that I started writing 1013s up on them for psychosexual disorders.
Mm-hmm.
And then said that what I'll do is I will start now going down to your bond hearing. I'll come to your bond hearing and show that the same predator that you say that you were not on the street is the one that you are now putting yourself out to be in open spaces inside of the jail. And that spread quickly around the jail, and masturbation by inmates immediately stopped quickly. In addition to saying that we would try to get them moved forward as being classified on the sex offenders list.
Wow.
So there's so many different ways that you can establish internal order and discipline, but you have to have a progressive, constitutionally minded sheriff that says, come here to do your time, but you're not going to come in here and act a damn fool like you did out there on the streets.
Yeah, and you bring up a great point. You say we knew who the mentally ill people were. In your opinion, as things are currently constructed right now, are you seeing that it's more so on the sheriff's department, that they're not as involved with the jail specifically and aren't aware and aren't trained on what someone who's mentally ill looks like, or is it just that they don't have a place to put these people, or is it a little bit of both?
It's a little bit of both. And again, I only speak on this from expert authority because you're not going to find anybody else that can come on the show and give you real history connected to law as well
Facts.
as to training. As I've told you before, I'm a Georgia Post senior instructor. I was frequently called upon to come and to teach the jail management course, even into retirement. And one of the courses that I taught was inmate supervision. So we taught new recruits because this is all part of the basic jail certification that you have to have in order to work inside of a jail. I'll deal with those private security guards here in a minute.
Mm-hmm.
So we teach mental health awareness. We teach how to deal with troubled inmates. That doesn't require these, fancy names, direct supervision facilities. Those are nice, but at the end of the day, you have to have a control over your inmates that they understand that your leadership presence means you're not going to do that foolishness here on my floor.
Right.
With that, I want to back up to that. Yes, we did mental health training. We taught them how to dispense medication, how to ensure the guys got their treatments, to the point that we were running a facility. Because one of the other things that we recognized was that the majority of our mentally ill inmates at the time were veterans.
Yeah.
These were not veterans who were broke. These were guys who got checks. These guys, essentially just displaced into the communities or what have you. And when you added that structure, order back into their lives when they were inside of jail, I mean, the sheriff came up and looked and was like, where am I at? This isn't the same place where they threw feces on the wall or threw urine and it smelled like crap inside of it. No, it was like it was a Marine Corps barrack. But that's because we put into their mindsets to treat them with some humanity. Now, I've
Right.
got to back up because I remember what you said, and I want to make sure that this point does not fall. Rob Pitts, as well as Natalie Hall, I hope that you're listening to what I'm getting ready to say. In the 2020 cycle the 2019 cycle is when the George Floyd incident occurred here, not in Fulton County, but they were big protests.
Yeah.
At the time, this facility that they're talking about, that they're building, the mental health facility, that's not something new. That was something that they went back in by pressure under Black Lives Matter that stood outside of the Fulton County Justice Center. I got the pictures, the photo, because I even appealed to Black Lives Matter that they were wrong in their perspective about that this was going to be mass incarceration. LaShawn Thompson and others probably would be alive today if they would have had that special needs unit. But Rob Pitts, as well as Natalie Hall, came out because COVID restrictions to address Black Lives Matter and told them that they were not going to participate in this particular project and they would vote it down. Lee Morris told them at the time this was going to come back and bite us if you are not careful. And I'd be damned if it did not come and bite them some years later. So don't try to rehash it and bring it back to make it look like this is an all new, brand new idea. You had the ability to build that wing in addition to build other modular spaces over the years. But again, it came back down to the Board of Commissioners not fulfilling their statutory role in keeping up with population growth in order to give us the proper bed spaces that we needed.
Yeah, and I want to talk about the money specifically as well, going into factoring into the training and everything, because I think something that gets lost in this conversation is that 1.3 billion, that's all encompassing. So it's for hiring, it's for the new facility, it's for the renovations, it's for everything. So a lot's going to have to be done with this money, which is understandably somewhat so that Pat Labat's saying, man, we need another 600,000 on top of that 1.3 million or billion that we're talking about. Looking at how things have been managed so far, when it comes to new hiring and staffing and training this new facility and the facility that's currently constructed, how do you think we move forward there? Because we've only hired, the numbers I'm looking at, there have only been 13 new hires in the last year, which is amazing to me. And I don't know if those numbers are right or not, but how do we fix that moving forward? Because if we don't, it seems like we're going to be right back in the same position we are now.
Well, Sheriff Labat, I hope that you're listening, that your workforce is a reflection of your mindset. Now, that's not Charles Rambo speaking. That's law speaking to what is called alter ego. The workforce is a reflection of the training, policy, and supervisory protocols as established by the sheriff. That's recognized in case law. So when you look at the current workforce, if you look at any particular facility across Georgia, but let's just deal with Fulton County. When you look at the mentality of the things that have gone on inside of this particular facility at 901 Rice Street, that's a reflection of the sheriff's mindset because you
Yeah.
should have done something about it to get on top of better hiring, better selection and hiring of staff. Using private security guards is not the answer. In fact, I'm going to call it out as outright illegal.
Mm.
You cannot hire private security to come and work inside of a constitutionally required facility that requires sheriff deputies as well as detention officers that are bonded. You cannot bond a security agency to work inside of a jail. You
Yes.
either work for the private corporation or you work for the county government, particularly the constitutional office.
Right.
So trying to use private security guards under the guise of they only work in the towers. No, they work in areas in contact with inmates. In fact, they just had a security officer that was arrested for bringing in contraband. Well, how did you get that close to
Yep.
inmates that you were able to deliver it to them? So you cannot do a cost-cutting measure of just hiring security officers and sticking them into the tower. You've got to hire qualified, bona fide detention officers and deputies that carry the constitutional mindset that they will follow the Constitution and ensuring that the duties are performed every day to ensure that there are no Eighth Amendment cruel and unusual conditions. And we say this not just for the safety of the inmates. I would tell the deputies all the time, hey, I want to make sure that these floors are so clean that when you go home, you're not tracking and you're not taking disease and vermin back to your homes. I mean, you got to think about, we came up during the time when hepatitis B, C, D, E, Z was strong and prevalent inside of county jails, and a lot of our deputies were getting infected.
Right.
So you're now carrying diseases back to your homes. You're taking all this vermin. So I want this place so damn clean that even the grand jury can come and make their inspection. So I'll
Mm.
ask this question: when is the last time that there's been a grand jury inspection of the facilities? There's not been one here recently that would otherwise tell the district attorney, as well as the sheriff, as well as the county commissioners, from the citizens and from an independent standpoint, here is where we saw that issues were going wrong. And that's law. A grand jury inspection is supposed to be taking place every year in order for them to look at facilities, staffing. So until you get a constitutionally minded workforce that, number one, will come in and not work in a toxic environment. Nobody cares about a $10,000 bonus.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody cares about that you make $85,000 a year. If I can't walk away with some decency and some sanity about, the job that I'm doing. I don't want to come to work to be subjected to sexual harassment. I don't want to come to work and to be subjected to incompetent supervision. This is a whole. I thought dealing with millennials was was a challenge, but this millennial generation, they ain't having it.
Nope, they don't
Either
care.
sir.
No, I said you're right. They don't care.
They don't care. And if you don't know what you're talking about, then essentially they will go to their own devices and start running things how they see fit.
Yep.
So you got to get a qualified, competent workforce, not only of deputies, but also supervisors, lieutenants, and captains. That makes the work environment comfortable and makes, I won't say comfortable, but makes it inviting to come, where people are invited to success, where you hold people up to their greatness and not to their limitation. Because I promise you, the way that we train, I could take the average detention officer once we finish with them within 6 months. I could send them to any jail in the state of Georgia, and they could be the chief jailer overnight.
Yeah. And we heard Quentin Coleman was on the show championing you. He's saying he's had conversations with the sheriff about your wisdom and your wealth of knowledge and how much is needed specifically in what's going on here in Fulton County. And man, I wish we could see you run and try and get back in there again. But I know that's a big undertaking, especially with everything that's happening behind the scenes. But go ahead.
Let me throw one other thing at you, but while it's fresh on my mind, and I said a few damning things, but here's where I'm really getting ready to just drop the bomb. If you really want to solve this issue, and I spoke before the Atlanta City Council last year.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. They were talking about the lease that they were trying to terminate to, because they want to take the facility and turn it into something else. They want to make it into some multi-purpose facility. I'm going to say this, and I say this out of public policy. The state, as well as the county, are going to have to just do eminent domain on the city jail.
Wow.
They're going to have to do eminent domain because the state has need for the facility. And it's to relieve the overcrowding. It's a facility that has already had been purposed for a jail. They have 900 something beds that could help us easily try to reduce some of this overcrowding. It's already ready to go. And they have been very stingy about wanting to give the facility to the county. It all goes back to previous administrations where they wanted to sell the city jail to the county damn near for double than what it was worth at the time that they purchased it. It too was not in the best condition, but we were in a dire strait to get a facility. But I applaud, here's what Rob Pitts, you know what I'm talking about. I applaud you that you did not fall for the bait in terms of buying that facility at the cost that they wanted to provide it to us.
Right.
So because these are state inmates that are charged with state charges, and the sheriff is an actor of the state, we don't want the facility forever, but we do need the facility to be able to help us with the transition, to cut down on the cost of having to send inmates to other jurisdictions, particularly this dumbass idea of sending inmates to Texas, Mississippi, and Florida to privatize facilities.
Yeah, exactly.
To send them out. Not only is that just outright illegal in terms of due process for that inmate in his case, it's going to cost the taxpayers millions and millions and millions of dollars more than just a simple fix of the facility. It's already located downtown central to our court system. They also have courtrooms across that you can get to from that jail over to the city jail. Some of those courtrooms could be transitioned into state courts, magistrate courts, in order to get this criminal justice system moving. But if the city does not want to give us the jail, then I'm going to suggest, and this was going to be my game plan, day one, that's what Charles Rambo wanted to do with Governor Kemp. If you're listening, sir, was to sit down with you and to come across a very amicable way of saying to the city, we're coming in and we're taking over this facility temporarily until we get our criminal justice system out of the way. And here's the reason why. Because the majority of the people that come into our criminal justice system come from your districts in Atlanta.
Amazing. And I'm so glad you said that. You actually answered my next question, which was going to be, what would you want to see day one? I think that would be absolutely amazing to see and much needed. And I can imagine anyone who's in the sheriff's department, I know y'all are watching this, would be excited and thankful and could easily get behind what you're saying right now. So hopefully at some point our guy Pat Labat will humble himself and at least heed some of the advice if he's not going to take your direct insight. We'll have to see.
Well, I have to say this. I've cursed, I've said some foul language, but I warned Pat, and I'm going to warn him again on your show. I said it to him at various debates. I've said it to him in his presence, even during the campaign. Plague after plague is going to continuously come at you until you humble yourself and get yourself into the mindset. If you go back to Daniel 3rd chapter and the 3rd verse, it was the sheriff and the other government officials who were on bended knee in the presence of Nebuchadnezzar, as opposed to standing up and doing their jobs on behalf of the people of that era, particularly Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who were getting ready to get thrown into a fiery furnace. Well, what does that got to do with anything today? That was the criminal justice system. That was the punishment. And they were getting ready to get thrown in without due process. Imagine what have happened if the judges and the counselors and the sheriff, as it mentions in Daniel 3rd chapter and the 3rd verse, if they had stepped up and said to Nebuchadnezzar, not in this county, not in this province, you won't. At least they will get their due process.
Right.
So with that, Pat, I say to you again in the name of God, and I don't say this being funny, nasty, arrogant, or wishing anything bad, until you come off of this high horse of being a constitutional officer, of which you are, but you cannot continuously play in this role. You've got to do the job as it dictates, else otherwise you, the Board of Commissioners, and the Board of Elections, all of Fulton County government will continuously suffer the chastisement that I told you all was going to come down on you well before it began.
There it is, man. Wise words from the man himself, Charles Rambo, an elite expert in this field and such a wealth of knowledge. It's always an honor to have you on the show, my friend. And I pray for the sake of everyone. I mean, taxpayers, incarcerated, mental people who are suffering from mental illness, that anyone listening to this, sheriff in particular, because I know he's listening, the people around him are listening, will take heed to your words and we can see some improvements moving forward before we get to the 2030s and this jail is in place. So thank you for that. I appreciate it.
I'd love to give you a quick closeout.
Yes,
if I could.
Absolutely.
All of this comes, and I've given you an earful today, but I promised another podcaster that we would talk about the reparation study that was done for Fulton County in terms of connecting some of the past atrocities of Black suffrage in Fulton County to, what they presented before the Board of Commissioners. And one of those particular findings dealt with the leasing as well as what they call the basically the leasing of inmates, and that goes all the way back into the 1800s, where it dealt with cruel and unusual punishment in terms of nasty and dilapidated conditions. And we ain't talking about across the United States. We're talking about a study that was conducted specifically on the jails, not only in Georgia, but specifically Fulton County. So I say this in that reparations study, and I promised the other podcaster that I would reserve this conversation for them, but this is something for us to close out on. And I'm speaking specifically to Black men, that are listening within the sound of my voice. This isn't to take away. Oh, I get 2 points. The other key thing here, you want to say that we should not have ICE-related facilities for one segment of illegal immigration, but you can set up privatization of prisons for Black men. And there's nobody out here speaking up against that.
Mm-hmm.
Something is very wrong with that particular position, particularly from civil rights leaders as well as attorneys or what have you. Where's the hypocrisy in that? Number two, the key thing is that we can tie this back to the 13th Amendment. This is something for your audience to now use into their own scholarship and research. The 13th Amendment was passed that specifically said that slavery nor involuntary servitude shall be permitted, except, why is this the only amendment that has an exception clause? That would almost be saying, like the Second Amendment, you are allowed to carry a firearm, except for, man, you'd have people that have lost their damn mind if you tried to interfere with their gun rights. So here in the 13th Amendment, you have an exception that says, shall not be permitted except for punishment of a crime. Black men, you need to wake up. You got to wake up and stop talking about this white man system. You can't find a job. You can't do this, and another. Stay up out of jail. I think Systems of a Grind came out with a song called "They Try to Build a Prison." They try to build a prison.
Yep.
Please, this whole thing is modeled after, the peanut system. That's what I was trying to say. Please, the system is set up for your demise and your fall, particular in patterns and ways where lifestyles are going to be further penalized in order to get you to come in the back of 901 Rice Street and other facilities, all because of our inability to use our own mind self and do something for ourselves and our communities. So the 13th Amendment still lives. It still lives well beyond 1865 to 2025, where mass incarceration is still real and somebody's benefiting and profiting from it.
Absolutely. And we're going to have you back so we can have a conversation about the culture, because that's definitely something that needs to be addressed as well. But I know you got to get out of here, so I appreciate you, Mr. Rambo. Thank you for all the
Please
support.
tell everybody, don't bomb me, but
no, they love you on the show. They do a great job supporting. So the last interview, absolutely excellent, and in this case, you giving some really great insight into how things can actually do well here in Fulton County moving forward, and hopefully a lot of this information will be taken and used by the powers that be. So thank you so much for your time, and I appreciate it.
Thank you again. I appreciate you having me. And tell Amy, thank you for her diligence.
Oh, she's amazing. Yep. Shout out to Amy, and we're looking forward to having you back soon. All right.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, my friend. Have a great day. All right, y'all, give it up to Charles Rambo in the building. Always an amazing conversation. This man is a library, and he's done it. He's been in there. He's been successful. Has all the information, all the solutions that we need to, implement things across the nation. And again, I keep saying this. If you guys don't care, if you're saying this is a black problem, specifically in Fulton County, it is. 95% of these people being locked up are black. Amy even dropped the numbers again in the chat. We heard about it from Jeremy yesterday with the bail project. It's insane. But your taxpayer dollars are going to this. So again, even if you put aside all of this jail talk, you put aside all the political talk, be understanding of what the people who are hired to work for you are doing. And that's why we're going to keep having these conversations, because I'm spending money on it. I want to know and understand what we're doing here. It's crazy, man. Shout out to Charles Rambo. We got some more conversation we're going to get into. Thank you to all 9,000 of y'all that are in here. Excuse me. We've got some more conversation we're going to talk about during the rest of the show. I know I've got some other topics I want to get into. We're going to talk about David. We're going to get into what's going on with the state election board here in Georgia, as well as some other things. So make sure y'all stay locked in. Going to have a great show as well. So let me read some of these comments and then we'll get into our next topics. I see we have a couple of super chats in here. Shout out to, oh, look at her. My beautiful, awesome, amazing Amy E is in here gifting 5 memberships. If y'all got a membership from Amy, please make sure you say thank you. Excuse me. I need to get some water. Also, make sure you check out the members only content if you haven't yet. If you got a membership, and you get instant access to all the videos we have on the channel. I know many of the members can see we've got videos scheduled out throughout the afternoon. You get to watch those right away. You don't have to wait for them to drop. And of course, you get your name highlighted in that beautiful green. So big shout out to Amy for all that she does. She's doing it all, man. Super chatting, helping with the production of the show, getting these amazing interviews set up, and so much more. Make sure you guys go follow Amy as well on X at IAmyLeigh on X. That's at IAMYLEIGH on X. Stay up to date on some of the latest news. Shout out to LA Pink. LA Pink is in the building as well. And she said mismanaging money is where all of these problems come from with the sheriff. Yeah, and he's saying they need. Did y'all see that? I mentioned it in the video and the conversation we had about this. Pat Labat's like, okay, 1.3 billion is cool, but we actually need 1.9 billion. My gosh. And in some cases, I could see what he means because, again, we talked about it a little bit with Charles Rambo, but this money, that 1.3 billion budget is for everything. So it's for the new facility, staffing that new facility, maintaining that new facility. It's for renovating Rice Street, staffing Rice Street, all of that, the training, everything that goes with it. So $600,000, could that maybe get you 12? I don't know, 12 more employees? I guess so. I mean, you can think about that for a second. That 600,000 could pay 12 employees for a year, I guess. So, I mean, the budget's, it's a big deal. It's something that needs to be looked at for sure. LA Pink also says, I feel like Atlanta is just helping the sheriff force the hand of the commissioners to give him a new jail and maybe to take over. As we heard Charles Rambo say, maybe that's the plan of the Board of Commissioners, is to just have full and complete control of what's going on with the jail. Again, but that's something that could happen. Something we got to look out for. All right, let's get into these other topics because we've got some more content we're going to talk about. We'll get into this situation with David and Celeste Rivas here. Again, if y'all haven't yet, please make sure you like the video on your way in and also subscribe. I know y'all are going to have a good time over here, so show some love to the content if you haven't yet. Let's go ahead and talk about this crazy situation with David. We've been covering the situation with David and Celeste Rivas from the beginning, and now we have an update. Celeste Rivas's autopsy has officially been released. It's unsealed. We heard from the LAPD and the district attorney's office that they told the judge that, hey, you can let everyone see it. And now we're actually going to get into the shocking details. Shout out to Amy for reporting on this on X. We're going to read her breakdown of it, and then we'll actually get into the medical examiner's document so you guys can see exactly what this poor child had to go through. First, let's hear from ABC7, and they'll give us a summary of what the medical examiner showed and what the autopsy is going to reveal, and we'll get into the documents here. Check this out.
A breaking update right now. Moments ago, Eyewitness News obtained the medical examiner's report for 14-year-old Celeste Rivas Hernandez. The teen's body was found decomposing in singer David's trunk at a tow yard last September. The report found that Rivas Hernandez's death was indeed a homicide caused by multiple penetrating injuries. The report also revealed that the teen weighed 71 pounds at the time of when her body was found. This all comes as David is expected to be back in court tomorrow after pleading not guilty to murder. He is facing a first-degree murder charge in the teen's death. He's also accused of having sex with someone under the age of 14 and mutilating human remains. Recently, the family of Rivas Hernandez broke their silence for the first time. They issued a statement thanking the LAPD and District Attorney's Office for their hard work and the people of Lake Elsinore for their support. A reminder to stay with Eyewitness News as we bring you the very latest on this breaking story. We will be covering it on air on abc7.com and on our free ABC7 Los Angeles app. We'll also push out any new breaking news updates.
All right, so let's go ahead and get into the documents. And thank you to Amy for posting this on X. Again, if y'all don't follow her, make sure you do that at IAmyLeigh on X, at IAMYLEIGH on X. She says this: the official report from the LA County Medical Examiner has been released, confirming that Celeste's death was a homicide resulting from multiple penetrating injuries. While the cause of death was already public knowledge, the autopsy provides a harrowing look at the specific evidence gathered by investigators, and we're going to get into it. Key pathological findings, Amy says. The medical examiner identified two primary fatal wounds to the torso. The abdominal injury, a penetrating wound that would cause significant damage to the liver. A chest injury, a wound to the left side of the that breached the chest cavity and fractured her ribs as she was hit hard. The report also notes that several other skin defects across her body through advanced decomposition prevented a definitive interpretation of every mark. There's evidence of the dismemberment as well. Perhaps the most chilling aspects of the document is the description of the post-mortem treatment of the body. The report confirms full thickness dismemberment of both the arms and the legs, moving the complete severance of the soft tissue and bone. Furthermore, Celeste's fourth and fifth fingers on her left hand had been amputated and were missing from the scene. And she had a matching tattoo with David, I believe Amy said, on one of those fingers as well. Two specific findings from the scene are expected to play a major role in the ongoing investigation. Blue plastic fragments. Investigators discovered and collected pieces of blue plastic embedded within the cut surfaces of the remains. It makes sense. Toxicology and recovery. Celeste was discovered in a state of decomposition inside the vehicle. As we know, toxicology screenings came back clear, ruling out drugs or toxins as a contributing factor to her death. As this case progresses, the origin of the blue plastic fragments may prove to be a pivotal evidence in identifying the tools and containers used by the perpetrator. Again, we're saying innocent until proven guilty, but Lord have mercy, this one is not looking great. Here we go. We have the medical examiner's case here. This is the case number. It is Celeste Rivas, as we know. Date of injury still undetermined. The place that it happened undetermined as well, which is interesting because, as we know and was reported by TMZ, David did take a drive out to the desert. What was that drive out to the desert for? I'm sure the district attorney is going to get into that during the trial. All right. And then we have the medical examiner's information and name there. Again, a reminder that the medical examiner did not want this report to be sealed. For some reason, the LAPD and the district attorney's office pushed for the judge to do that, and it happened. I still find that interesting as well. At the time she died, they show Celeste was 15 years old, a child. Medical report summary: severe postmortem changes, 2 penetrating wounds of the torso, right abdomen with injury to the liver, left chest with penetration of the underlying intercostal space, and coracal disruption of adjacent ribs. Man. Other findings: bilateral dismemberment of upper and lower extremities, multiple additional skin defects, and then they have the toxicology report separate. Summary and opinion narrative from the medical examiner. From their office, this 15-year-old female, Celeste Abigail Rivas Hernandez, was found dismembered in a state of decomposition inside of a car trunk on September 8th of 2025. Death was pronounced at the scene, obviously. Autopsy examination was limited by extensive postmortem changes. These are 2 penetrating wounds of the torso with smooth edges that may represent sharp force injury. So she was most likely stabbed, is what they're saying. The wound on the upper abdomen penetrates the liver, and the wound to the left of the chest penetrates one of the left intercostal spaces with disruption of the adjacent ribs, cortical surfaces. The left lung appears intact. So it didn't puncture her lungs, but the blade was deep enough to puncture her liver. And also, I mean, her chest was broken, which is amazing that they can determine that that happened while she was stabbed, which means she must have been hit hard. A bilateral upper and lower extremities show full thickness dismemberment. Multiple other skin and soft tissue defects are present without apparent associated internal injuries. The etiology of these defects is not clearly apparent due to severe postmortem changes. As Amy said, they're having a hard time determining when that happened. Postmortem toxicology performed on the liver tissue shows the presence of low-level ethanol, which may be due to the postmortem changes or our ingestion, and does not appear to be contributory to the cause of death. Given the history and circumstances as currently known by me, in the setting of the finding by examination, ancillary studies, and in the absence of other definitive causes of death, the cause of death is multiple penetrating injuries. She was stabbed multiple times. The manner of death is classified as a homicide. Okay, and then we have the identification here of her, and they have more information about what they found. Radiology review, they had CT scans reviewed and consistent with the autopsy examination. Good Lord. The external examination here, of course, she was female, Hispanic. There's her height and weight. Other extremities see evidence of traumatic injury, which we'll get to here in a second. They go to describe her hair. Cannot assess. It says they cannot assess some of this information still because of postmortem changes, which is amazing. I mean, her body must have been severely decomposed. I think Amy was saying there's even an eye was missing. Here we go. Let's get into it. Postmortem changes. Liver mortis. Indiscernible, I believe that says. It looks like some of it got messed up in the copying phase. Liver mortis, it was indiscernible. Rigor mortis was absent. External decomposition changes. Here we go. Description, her skin color was dark brown. It was drying. It says here multiple insect larvae were present. Oh, gosh. Foul odor, obviously. Other external decomposition changes. The head is partially skeletonized with an absent left eye. There is liquefaction of the soft tissues. I mean, this poor girl. Internal organs and tissue postmortem. Soft. Okay, we're not going to go through all that. Evidence of traumatic injury. The order in which the injuries are described is for descriptive purposes only and is not intended to imply the sequence of the injuries. All medical examiner diagrams are not intended to be facsimiles. Hopefully I said that right. Nor are they to draw to scale. Skin defect. You have the entrance. 3/4 of an inch involving the right abdomen. That was the first stab. You have another skin defect involving the lateral lower left chest. That was another, allegedly, I should say, stab wound. 9/16 of an inch, a little bit closer. And multiple skin defects are also present over the torso, with many perforating the skin and soft tissue without identifiable soft tissue hemorrhage or associated internal organ issues. So she was stabbed in places and there wasn't any internal organs that were damaged as well. Guys, yeah, this is tough to read too. If you want this full document, again, I can leave the link for y'all to access that. Amy has it for you over on X. Very sad situation. Let me know what y'all think. Is David guilty? Is David the one who did this to her? I mean, he pled not guilty so far, and we have to say innocent until proven guilty. I'll be interested to see what the DA shows in the evidence in this case, because again, as I keep saying, if he lured her to this house and told her to come over after she had threatened him in some way, I think it's pretty much, from a jury standpoint, going to be an open and shut case. Let me know what you guys think in the comments in the chat. Guys, this is tough. This is tough. And thank you. Big shout out to Amy for posting this and giving the information. I mean, there's a lot more we could go through here. Obviously, they took photos. I mean, the fact that her skeleton was showing, it seems like she would have had to have been in there for a while. Because for her body to decompose that much, I mean, geez. Which it makes you wonder why they just didn't go back and get the body. Were they afraid someone was going to catch them? I don't know. This is very, very sad. All right, let's go ahead and get into this Julio Foolio trial. We actually covered the Julio Foolio trial when it first started with Alicia Andrews, and we're actually going to hear opening statements in defense of Alicia Andrews' boyfriend, Isaiah Chance. Now, Isaiah Chance was actually talked about a lot during Alicia Andrews' trial, specifically when Alicia took the stand and she was saying how terrible of a person he was, how, you know, she felt like he abused her, and a lot of the reasons that she did what she did, or she played any part that she played into the murder of Julio Foolio was because this man was threatening her in a lot of ways. So now we're actually going to hear from Isaiah Chance's attorney and see what they have to say about Isaiah Chance and his involvement. Shout out to Mel for posting this over on I'm Not a Lawyer, but she actually clipped up the full opening statement from his attorney, and we're going to cover that here, and I'll leave a link for that to you guys as well. So let's go ahead and get to Isaiah Chance in this Julio Foolio trial. We're going to hear the opening statements for Isaiah Chance from his attorney. There are actually multiple defendants in this case and in the trial of Julio Foolio, and they each were able to give opening statements for each defendant. Now, if you don't know about the Julio Foolio trial, we've covered it here at length, and the situation is really sad. A rapper who had some beef with other rappers and a local beef with the ATK, who was a local gang. They were going back and forth. This man, Julio Foolio, had a birthday, and he was stalked and killed on his birthday, allegedly by the 4 defendants in this case. So we're going to hear opening statements from the defense attorney who is defending someone who we saw was convicted of manslaughter, Alicia Andrews, and this is her boyfriend. We're going to hear about his involvement and why he may have not been guilty in this case. I'll be interested to see what the defense attorney has to say. Check this out.
All jurors are in, Judge.
Okay, very good. Welcome back, members of the jury. We are ready to proceed. Mr. Petraeus, do you wish to make an opening statement on behalf of your client, Isaiah Chance? Okay, you may proceed.
Good afternoon. As you all know, my name is Justin Petraeus, and I, along with Christopher Bolt, Richard Watts, and Brandy Smith, represent Isaiah Chance. The state seeking, as charged, Isaiah Chance with first-degree premeditated murder. That's as serious as it gets in the state of Florida. And that is await your decision and what we do here these next few weeks. And that is precisely why the Constitution demands the highest burden in the legal system, beyond the exclusion of every reasonable doubt, and every step of the way. Isaiah doesn't have to prove anything. I mention that again, not that you don't know that, you know that very well, not only because it's constitutional bedrock, because I want you to view this state not through Isaiah, but through what the state can prove, and more importantly, what they cannot prove. I asked you to hold the state to their very high burden, which is ruling out every reasonable doubt of every fact and element necessary to prove the allegations against Mr. Chance. That is their burden. That's what you swore to hold them to, and that's what I'm going to ask you to do. As you know, they're attempting to prove 3 things against Isaiah Chance. Him as a principal, or excuse me, 2 things. Isaiah is a principal, premeditated murder, and conspiracy to commit that murder. And to do that, they need to prove 3 things. That Isaiah wanted Charles Jones dead. I asked you to look for that conscious intent that he wanted Charles Jones dead. Not speculation, not inferences, the conscious intent. Make the state prove that.
Seems pretty
I believe they'll be unable to do so once you've seen all the evidence. They also have to prove that he had actual knowledge of the plan, that specific plan, to kill Charles Jones that night. Again, not inferences, not speculation, not assumptions on what his behavior may or may not have meant. I believe at the end of the evidence they will be unable to do so once you've seen it all. And lastly, that he did something, some act, some concrete step. Mr. Harmon showed you the list of what constitutes that in the principal statute. Help, assist, cause, encourage. However, I believe once you see all the evidence, any act that he's done requires you to speculate as to its meaning, and that you also speculate as to the knowledge he had when he did that act. Watch carefully through this trial. I believe when you see all the evidence, the state will be unable to prove any of those 3 things, and if they can't prove any of those, you would have to find Mr. Chance not guilty. Let's start with knowledge. The state's theory will be that he was part of a conspiracy, that Isaiah was part of this conspiracy to kill Charles Jones. And he traveled to Tampa knowing the purpose of that trip was to kill Charles Jones. But ask yourself, is there going to be a witness, a piece of evidence, a text message, an admission, something that proves that Isaiah knew about this plan, that he had.
I wonder if Alicia Andrews is going to testify. That'll be interesting as well.
Knowledge of the plan to kill Charles Jones. I submit they will not. They will be unable to rule out, beyond a reasonable doubt, that Isaiah simply was not aware of the specific plan to kill Charles Jones.
I don't know.
For instance, Mr. Harmon showed Isaiah Chance moving bags. Look for evidence that Isaiah knew what was in those bags, not the assumption that he must have known or he could have known or he should have known. Look for proof that anyone knew what was in those bags. Wait for a witness to testify that they could say what was in those bags and that Isaiah knew what was in those bags. I submit that will not come during the evidence. Now, in jury selection, Ms. Doherty mentioned a principal hypothetical. I believe it involved Angelina Jolie. But in that scenario, we had a nanny who was the principal. We had a boyfriend who did the physical act of kidnapping the children in this case. But we were privy in that scenario to the conversation between the nanny, the principal, and the person who committed it. So there was no confusion about whether or not she had knowledge of this crime they were going to commit. That is not going to be the case, I submit here. You're not going to hear evidence that Isaiah was aware, like in this case, like in the hypothetical. Do not fill in the holes to the state's case. Hold them to that burden. Make them prove that Isaiah had knowledge of this crime.
This is going to be, guys, this is going to be tough. The whole reason Alicia Andrews is here in the first place is because Isaiah was using her phone in a lot of instances to communicate with the other defendants in this case. So saying, hey, you're not going to see that, brother, I don't know about this one. Because the whole reason Alicia Andrews was on trial is because that her boyfriend was using her phone and communicating back and forth with some of the other people involved. So that's going to be a tough one to say. He wasn't a part of it when Alicia Andrews was found guilty of manslaughter. Oh, man.
Now let's talk about an act in furtherance. Again, it needs more than being present. It needs more than association. It needs more than just traveling to a city. I believe the evidence will not show an act, something that Isaiah did to assist this murder, while having the knowledge the murder was taking place. This goes back to Mr. Wise's example in jury selection about the progressive commercial, I believe, with Jamie, where he helps people drive away from a bank robbery, not knowing they've committed the bank robbery. You have to have knowledge that the crime was going to occur and commit an act of furtherance to help that crime. You need it all. We talked about the Airbnb being booked. Mr. Harmon did in 1.3 miles, I think he said, away from the murder scene. However, I believe the evidence will show you that Mr. Jones did not book that hotel until just before they got there, hours before, whereas the Airbnb was booked days before. So this wasn't a situation where they followed someone to where they thought they were going to be. No one knew they were going to be at this Home 2 Suites.
Come on, man.
We've seen a picture of Isaiah on the phone, not his phone, on what they believe Alicia Andrews' phone, talking to who they believe Sean Gathright.
Yep.
Look for the state to be able to prove what is the contents of that phone call. I submit they will not be able to prove what was said in that phone call. And definitely not be able to prove that phone call had anything to do with the murder. They want you to assume it did. They want you to say it probably did. But that's not beyond a reasonable doubt. I would also submit that that's the only time that he's seen with Alicia's phone. And that will be stacked on the inference that he had knowledge. Doing something stacked on the inference that he had knowledge. And you can't stack inferences.
Oh, boy.
You also were shown that Isaiah didn't get to the crime scene, allegedly, until, we know for a fact, till after the shooter's car was already there. They were there first, and he was there. We also know, as Mr. Harmon pointed out, the shooter's car was watching Mr. Jones leave Truth 18. So they knew when he left. Mr. Harmon also showed that Isaiah was driving at Teasers. That's the only time he's seen driving that silver Cruise. Just like that's the only time he's seen on the phone, on Alicia's phone. Yet Mr. Harmon continued to say through his opening, here's Isaiah texting from her phone. Here's Isaiah texting from her phone. Here's Isaiah sending this from their phone. There's no proof of that. I asked you to look for proof that Isaiah ever used her phone more than once. So we have the one time on camera. They need to prove the other times. You cannot just assume every time her phone is used, Isaiah's the one using it. Without proof. I submit there will be none. Just like you cannot assume that just because that silver Cruise is driving, that Isaiah is the one driving it.
Mm-hmm.
I submit you will not be able to, there will be no evidence showing that he's driving it at Truth 18, and no evidence that in that video at the crime scene, you'll have no evidence of who's driving the car. And you cannot assume he's driving that car at that time. They want you to believe he's a lookout, but look for evidence of what he did, not assumption based on the phone use that we don't know he's using. Look for evidence of what he did as a lookout at that crime scene to help in furtherance of the crime. We saw the car drive by, we didn't see it stop, we didn't see any communication between the two. Look for proof of communication between Isaiah, not a phone, didn't belong to him, Isaiah and the alleged shooters. I submit you will not find any. Again, you need to find specific intent that he wanted Charles Jones dead. That night in that murder. And I submit you will not have that. The evidence will not show that. You will see no statement, you will hear no admission. You will see nothing that puts you in the mind of Isaiah Chance. Nothing on that stand will be able to put you in that mind. It will be assumption and speculation. They will lean on cell phone data and location evidence, but that is not intent. And they will lean on social media. You saw the spaces. That requires a lot of speculation as to what exactly that meant weeks before in a What Mr. Harmon referred to as an argument, I would take umbrage with that. We'll see what you believe. What the evidence will not show you is Isaiah Chance firing a weapon. It will not show you Isaiah Chance directing anyone to fire a weapon. The alleged gun that he's in his possession, that's the last time we could see that gun. And there's no indication that specific gun was used or involved in the murder whatsoever. The state's evidence, I do not believe, will give you the unambiguous definitive proof the law requires before you can find him guilty of either charge. The prosecution is going to tell you a story. It's built on cell phone data, location, gang rivalries, a lot of which happened before Isaiah probably could even drive. For instance, those two videos that weren't, I think the first one was Spinabins and Young and Ace happened 5 years ago. That's what we're talking about, 5 years ago. When you hear all the evidence, I do not believe you'll believe the state is proving their case beyond a reasonable doubt. They will show you he traveled to Tampa. They will show you he was present that night. But then they will ask you to make a leap, to assume that presence equals guilt, that association equals conspiracy, and that being there means he planned a murder. And that is not proof, that is speculation, that is assumption, and does not meet their high burden. I'm going to ask you not to fill in the gaps of the state's case. They're going to paint a picture for you. They need to paint the whole picture. They can't ask you to connect the dots of part of the picture. They have a burden. It is a significant burden, and I'm going to ask you to hold them to that burden. I keep bringing up that burden, and I apologize, but it is very important because it is a very high burden for a very important reason. And at the close of this trial, I will come back to you once we have actually seen all the evidence, what has been presented, and you'll be able to view it and put what you believe your weight is on it. And I think it'll be far less below the burden of what they need to prove this case. And when I do so, I'm going to actually do one thing. When I come back before you at the end of this trial, follow the law. And once you've seen all the evidence and heard all the witnesses, I believe the only just verdict will be not guilty. Thank you.
All right, guys, listen. All I heard was a lot of, here's what they're not going to be able to show, which is important, obviously, because the burden of proof is on the state, is on the prosecutors in this instance. But we've already heard a lot of the evidence in the Elisa Andrews trial, specifically when it comes to Isaiah Chance. It's going to be an uphill battle for them, to say the least. Let me know what you guys think about this in the comments, in the chat. He really didn't give us that much information. He said, hey, they're not going to be able to prove it. Yeah, maybe he did it, but they got to prove it, guys. Oh, God. Is that a good defense? Is that a solid defense? I don't know. I'll be interested to see if Alicia Andrews is on the witness list. Actually, let me look that up real quick and find out. That would be something interesting to know. Let's see. Is Alicia Andrews on the witness list? I can imagine that she would be. Excuse me. Alicia Andrews on the... I'm going to tell y'all here in just a second. Because if she is, then I think Isaiah is pretty much cooked. Alicia Andrews. Oh, she's not on the witness list. Wow. I'm surprised to see that. Why she isn't a witness? While she testified in her own defense during the October 2025 trial, detailing her relationship with co-defendant Isaiah Chance and claiming she was unaware of the murder plot, she is not listed as a state or defense witness for the ongoing trial of the remaining 4 suspects. Interesting. I'm surprised. Hey, shout out to Alicia Andrews. She just get to chill in her cell. All right. I thought for sure she would be a witness. That's interesting. All right, let's go ahead and get our next topic in here. And this is something we're actually going to be talking about with Janelle King and Kelvin King coming up tomorrow. I guess now would be a good time to talk about that. We're going to have Janelle and Kelvin King on the show tomorrow for an amazing interview. They will be here talking with us about a lot of things Kelvin is doing with his campaign for Secretary of State. And we're going to talk about what's going on with the state election board. Lot to talk about there. We're going to get into it because, man, we've had discussions and conversations about the lever being pulled, the red button being pushed when it comes to elections here, because July is coming up and QR codes are finna be illegal, which is crazy. So let's go ahead and get into this conversation here. Let me make sure I've got the right link pulled up. There we go. And we'll talk about it. So the state election board here in Georgia had a special meeting, and they called a special meeting because they are trying to desperately figure out what is going to happen with the upcoming elections. The Secretary of State's office has been completely useless. And that's not just me saying that. We've heard from people who are election workers and poll workers who have no information. We've even heard from election officials that haven't heard from the Secretary of State, don't know what's going on. And now the state election board is stepping in and saying, okay, how are we going to be able to enforce this law? And how are we going to be able to do our job? And what is that going to look like moving forward? So let's get into a couple of clips during this meeting that they had to try and figure out what's going to happen with our election. Of course, we've got the Honorable Janelle King is up here first, and we're going to have Janelle and Kelvin King on the show tomorrow. So make sure you guys tune in for that. Check this out.
Okay, so there's some areas of the rule that I just kind of want to flesh out a little bit for myself. A cost analysis. So you stated that this would cost no money, but then I think I heard you mention that it may with counties. What have you found in your cost analysis associated with this rule?
Okay. Certainly, any types of cost analysis needs to be updated for the most current things. But when we think about, in the very big picture, when we think about the cost of printing ballots, the commercial price for printing ballots is going to be like 30 to 35 cents. And you don't need to print. One of the myths is that you have to print a ballot for every active voter. That is not a correct interpretation of the law. But when you print.
Okay, so we talked about this with the gentleman from Hall County who said he was election official, or a poll worker, I believe, election official out in Hall County. And he said, listen, we're going to have all this paper, and it's going to be very difficult and very expensive. We have this sheet of paper, or we have the QR code, or we have this digital system that's 10 cents. And then we have these pieces of paper we're going to have to print out and use. It's going to cost us 3 times as much. And that's something that's being weighed here, obviously, by the state election board.
Print the necessary number of ballots through commercial printer. It is by far the cheapest method you're ever going to print ballots. Printing ballots today on the ballot marking devices, it's about the most expensive way you can do it. If you think about all of the labor costs that go into the touchscreen programming, testing, transport, security, maintenance, warranties, moving them to the polling places, it becomes clear that you have invested massive amounts of labor cost into each ballot. When the much cheaper way to do it, and the cost analysis put forth by experts at the time of HB 316 that was passed showed that hand-marked paper ballots are far less expensive than the touchscreen system. So it's clear. And certainly it would be good to go into more analysis with your election directors who have their budgets and can show this, that your ballot cost, your ballot per ballot and per voter ballot cost is going to be far less. There will be training cost. Some counties will need to obtain ballot on demand printers. They're probably running about 5,000 apiece. And they're probably statewide would need about 150 ballot on demand printers. That will be a fairly small bill for out-of-pocket costs compared to what you will save.
Interesting.
But one of the reasons that hand-marked paper ballots have been, pre-printed ballots have been popular across the nation is because it is the most cost-effective way to vote.
Yeah, and we heard a lot of information from people saying the time it's going to take, and we're going to talk about that with the board, the time it's going to take. And it's interesting to see how much different information there is out there, because on one hand, we have people saying that's going to take time. You're going to have delayed reporting. It's going to cost a lot of money. We're not going to be able to train the people. And as we're going to hear in a second from Marilyn Marks, she's going to say it'll take us maybe half a day to get everybody trained on how to handle this. It seems pretty straightforward. And again, guys, Dominion hasn't been around that long. And as we heard from other people on this show, I mean, Georgia, Garland Favorito has talked about it as well. Georgia is the only one who's moving forward this way and who's moving this way when it comes to elections. So got to get it figured out.
I think I was also wanting to hear about labor and whether or not the counties would have to, like, will it increase the amount of people they would have to hire, or will it decrease?
It should generally decrease it, because if you think about when you and I go into the polling place, we don't see all the teams of people who were involved in setting up those machines and testing the machines and moving the machines and getting them on the truck and putting them up in the, so all of that, it becomes invisible to us, right? So that labor cost to a great extent goes away. But also there should be no need for any more people to be hired in the polling place. Maybe the first election, you might want to have some extra greeters, if you will, to say, here's where you go get your pens. It's a little different. But for example, today, because of the requirement, the legal requirement for every voter to review their ballot before they scan it to make sure the computer printed it correctly, your rule says there has to be an assigned person who does nothing other than recommend or tell the voter to do that. With a hand-marked paper ballot, it's self-verifying. Nobody has to make sure that the ink went onto the paper where you put it. The ink went there. So you could have that person assist voters in other ways. No need to hire more people.
Okay. Another thing I noticed, so you mentioned in the rule, cybersecurity.
Member King, can you turn your volume up a little bit?
Turn my volume up?
Yeah, I mean, for some reason,
Technical difficulties.
I'm sorry, it was a little low.
Okay. So I can talk louder. Okay. You mentioned cybersecurity, ballot accounting, and inventory controls in the rule. Are you expected this to be defined by the SEB, or how, okay, so that's something that will fall on us.
Right. Well, yes. And you may want to issue some guidance before you would have time to go through the whole rulemaking process. Issuing some informal guidance along with the Secretary of State, I think would be a smart idea for the counties.
Good luck with that.
A lot of the counties that I've talked to don't realize some of the cybersecurity risk involved in ballot on demand printers. And so it would be a really good idea to make sure that they are grounded in that, and that you guys and the Secretary of State come up with some solid recommendations, which you would eventually want to turn into rules, but give them some help on the front end.
Okay. Next question.
Excuse me, may I offer one other suggestion on that? And that is, remember how in 2020, the state provided for Dominion technicians to be involved at all of the counties, and the state paid for Dominion technicians to be there. We would recommend that if the counties wanted the help that we're having to use ballot on demand printers, the same type of technicians could be deployed to babysit the ballot on demand printer, let that be their baby for the course of the first election or two.
Okay.
Interesting.
The next question, daily ballot counting. Can you explain what that would look like, or is that something that we will also have to define as SEB and working with the SOS?
The same. I think that type of detailed rule needs to probably start with guidance after you've talked to the election directors. But what we were trying to say is a ballot accounting, not ballot not vote counting at all, but accounting for all of your blank ballots. And you will find thousands of jurisdictions across the nation that do this every day of elections. They know how to, every morning,
it's been done,
their
guys.
poll workers account for all the ballots they have on hand. At the end of the day, how many they used, how many they have left. And people think about all these ballots flying around like uncontrolled. That's not the way it is. They come to the poll workers in shrink-wrapped, pre-numbered packs, easy to account for. So you're only accounting for what's been opened. And it's easy to do your inventory every day. You think about today, when we have all the blank ballot stock in all of the printer trays throughout all the polling places, that's not being accounted for as it should.
Well, I think saying easy and simple are two different things, because again, we've heard from poll workers who have said, okay, yes, if you think about how it's going to be done, it's simple. But when you're talking about ballots that are 4 pages long, or you're talking about maybe a population that has more people, then you maybe start to run into issues. And that's where the delays in finding out who actually won and tabulating can take place. So I think that's more the issue than how the system is, because we know, I mean, just having the paper ballots is going to be a lot simpler, but easier. I think some of the poll workers would disagree with that.
Should be. And that is blank ballot stock where people can generate ballots if we're not careful.
And you do want to count the ballots that were used. So does that mean we have to pull them out of the scanner if we're using, well, I mean, we're going to use
I
optical
wouldn't
scanner
be
with this,
pulling
right?
them out. I wouldn't be pulling them out of the scanner every night. And this is the kind of good discussion you're going to want to get into with your election directors. But what we would recommend is every day during early voting, even today, not just if we go to hand marked paper ballots, but that every day those early voting locations, that the ballots are secured and brought back to a fireproof vault at the election center, and that when they are, at that point, there is ballot accounting before they leave. In other words, how many ballots do we have? Let's be sure the number that leaves here is the number that makes it to the central fireproof vault.
Okay, last question, and for now. Now the instructions to the SEB, that part does concern me a bit because I don't know how we would define honestly trying. Some may say, well, I sent a couple of emails, I was trying. Others may say, well, I picked up the phone and called, So I do think that kind of puts us in a position where we could be, again, another lawsuit if the county says, well, I was honestly trying, and now we have to defend what that means. That's something that's more, to me, that's a personal thing. And I don't necessarily like that portion of the rule. But thank you for answering my questions, and I may have some later.
And well, thank you, Member King. And we're certainly open to a friendly amendment on that to strike that language if you would like to do that before adopting it into rulemaking. And we would just recommend that perhaps you do informal, non-binding guidance with a little more explanation in it to the counties saying, look, we know it's a tough transition. We want to help you. We're not going to be unreasonable in trying to enforce this big change.
Got it.
Yeah, and it is going to be a big change. So we're going to have to see what they decide. We're going to get into another segment where they actually talk about what is going to happen with the rule and how it's going to be implemented. So stay tuned for that. And let me know what you guys think in the comments and in the chat. Ooh, it's going to be an uphill battle. We're going to talk about it here in a second. Let me see if I can find the timestamp. And I think it's actually coming up next. There's so much that went on during this meeting. And as I mentioned to y'all, we're going to talk about it with Janelle King tomorrow. We've got Janelle and Kelvin King coming on tomorrow. So shout out to Kelvin King as well for joining us. It's going to be a fun conversation. But make sure you guys tune in for that. Let's get to, I think it takes place here actually in the next few seconds, talking about what the hand count rule would be.
All right, thank you.
So let's go ahead and get into it. So now we're going to talk about what's going to happen with the hand counting rule here in Georgia. We've seen evidence and information about how this could possibly work. And we've even seen videos of where training was being done at the registrations and elections office here in Fulton County. Now they're actually going to talk about what the hand count rule would look like. And we're going to hear some pushback from some of the board members on how this is going to move forward. Check it out.
Mm-hmm.
Member Gazal?
I'm sorry. I said I was done, and of course I'm not. So I do have some very serious concerns about accessible voting for disabled voters. Right now, we have accessible machines that are set up and the votes are indistinguishable because they use the same ballots. We do not have currently the technology, and we don't have access to funding to implement anything like this that would make it much harder to distinguish a ballot that was cast by a disabled voter on accessible machines. Given enough time, given the funding, it would be possible to reprogram one machine and a printer to print a full-face ballot to make it far more difficult to distinguish a vote cast on a BMD as an accessible method of voting for somebody who wants to vote independently.
Right.
But under your rules, any voter who wanted to cast a ballot in person but had to use an accessible machine would instantly be identifiable through any sort of digital imaging or through a review of the ballots by hand, because of course we all know ballots are now public records. What is your solution for not violating the ADA?
Right. Okay. So I'm glad you brought this up. It is one of the we were going to try to get into just this in the whole privacy issue, but of course there was no time to do it in the presentation time. And certainly what we recommended as part of this our proposal is that 5.5A be superseded by a rapid deployment of 5.17 or above, or later. And that would, as you pointed out, be able to permit what look like hand-marked paper ballots to be used from the touchscreens. That would not take too long or much money to implement, because you're only dealing with, you know, what, maybe 3,000 of those machines. But we have got exactly the problem that you were talking about, not just for people who require the use of the touchscreens for accessibility. We have that problem for every voter right now, because 5.5A has a flawed algorithm. And we mentioned it the other day, Member Gazal, in the board meeting. And that is, we have traceable ballots right now, and the secretary has admitted it, counties have admitted it, and it is because the BMD software is the random number assignment algorithm is flawed, and the newer versions take care of that. It is one more reason that it is compelling for this board to go ahead and move to hand-marked paper ballots, so that not everybody's votes will be identifiable. It's not everyone, but it's easier in early voting. And that very quickly, the equipment that you are talking about is one of the easiest things to do, and all the things we are asking be done. It is absolutely one of the easiest things to do, to change out those printers, because these are going to just be off-the-shelf printers, change out those printers and update the software for those units. But thank you for raising that.
Can you point me to the statutory provision that gives the state election board the authority to determine what software is used? Basically, you're telling us, you're asking us to order the Secretary of State to change their software. Where is that authority?
Okay, that authority is in enforcing the law. You do have the authority to direct compliance with law through a cease and desist order or many other ways. And right now, that software violates HAVA, because it does not allow a private vote. It violates the Georgia Constitution that requires secret ballots. It violates about 4 or 5 different statutes in Georgia law requiring absolute secrecy, including of the BMD machines. That software he is using, or that he installed, is violating the law. And I believe that this board absolutely has the duty to force to require compliance with the ballot privacy laws, the ballot secrecy laws. So I know this is not anything this board has done before, but it certainly has the duty to make sure that ballot secrecy laws are being complied with.
So aside from the dicta in Judge Totenberg's opinions, can you point me to any judicial determination that our system is in violation of HAVA or ballot secrecy laws?
Well, of course, since there has not been a DOJ adjudication, they've not sued, and they are the only parties who can sue. No, certainly not. But just because it hasn't been adjudicated certainly does not mean that it is legal. In fact, there have been numerous meetings of this board, as well as county boards, where it has been acknowledged and admitted, we can't provide ballot secrecy. We can't do it because of the touchscreens. So that's a pretty good admission, as well as we have numerous emails from counties. And I believe they would quote it, it's been a while since I've looked at them, but they quoted the Secretary of State in saying, look, you can't be delivering ballot images as you used to do, because they are identifiable. I mean, we have county after county who have written us saying we can't give you ballot images because we can identify who voted those ballots. So, you know, it doesn't really matter shouldn't matter to this board whether or not a court has ordered it. When you know it's against the law, it is your duty to order compliance with law, not just wait for a court to do it. You don't need to do it if the court's already done it.
Well, certainly Georgia courts have plenty of jurisdiction over the Georgia law and Georgia Constitution, but for some reason nobody has indicated that.
That makes me a little uncomfortable to think that we have to enforce law that hasn't been ruled to be illegal. You know, I understand your position, Marilyn. I just, you know, if a court hadn't said it's illegal, why would we be able to say that.
Well, because it is your primary responsibility before it goes to a court.
Yeah.
If we were going to rely on the court as the first line of defense, there would be no need for the board to have the directive from the General Assembly saying it is your duty to insist on compliance with law. We wouldn't need you guys. We'd just go to the court for everything, right? They wouldn't have need to, the General Assembly wouldn't need to tell you for you to do it. If your
Great point,
view
Marilyn.
is, well, until the court says it's wrong, it's not wrong.
Well,
Great point.
I think your duty is pretty clear.
Marilyn, can I
Yes, please, Rob, go ahead.
I'm sorry. I just wanted to clarify one point. I mean, a couple of things respectfully. Judge Totenberg's opinion did rule on the legality of these things, and I know it was described as dicta, but it actually was not what you'd call dicta. Typically, it was her rulings, and the documents I cited are rulings that were essential to the holdings that she reached. And Member Gonzalez is definitely correct that the curling case is currently on appeal because there was a standing issue that the 11th Circuit has to resolve. But the merits findings that underlay the court's rulings prior to the standing issue being decided are binding law of the case as between the parties while the case is still alive, which it is because it's on appeal. And so, Judge Totenberg did rule that the current system violates the law. And so that's why we're able to point to those decisions to say that this petition is a way to fix that.
Oh man, I know Janelle's going to be fired up about this conversation because this information is readily available. And we know that this is the reason why the board is here. They're here to speak on this. They're here to move this forward, and just relying on the court to say, okay, we got to go back and forth and try and figure it out ourselves it's been a lot of the frustration of the people who have spoken during the state elections board. Many of the board members are trying to move things forward when it comes to finding a resolution to this, because waiting on the Secretary of State's office hasn't been helpful at all.
All right, Member Grubbs?
Yeah, I guess I'm just a little bit confused because every time we have an SEB meeting, we enforce the law when we make findings from when there are complaints made and we refer someone to the AG or to the local DA.
Exactly.
I want to be sure that we're not selectively enforcing the law.
That's what it sounds
how can we enforce the law when it comes to people who are voting illegally or people who are wearing inappropriate attire that went to vote and they're wearing candidate things, or if it's a candidate who is out there, at a polling place hanging around, and we say the candidate violated the law. I don't want to selectively enforce the law if either we enforce the law or we don't. And that concerns me very much because everybody's afraid of a lawsuit. Well, how about a lawsuit coming down the pike saying that we're selectively enforcing the law?
Yeah, do your job. Well said.
Or not enforcing the law.
Are you finished, Member Grubbs?
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's kind of a rhetorical question, but I don't think we can pick and choose what. I mean, the law is the law, is it not? And as far as Senate Bill 214 coming out of the House, to your point, Member Gazal, I mean, that did not pass through on sine die. That did not become law.
It didn't.
And just like you were saying about the case with curling and what actions there were or were not. At present we are faced with SB 189 and the date, and in my view, I don't see how we can prolong taking action as a board in this great crevasse we find ourselves in of, we know that 189 is a law. As it sits today, it'll go into effect July 1st. The legislature may or may not come back into session. I personally don't think, they had 40 days to deal with this, and they've had
not enough time
since 2024 to deal with this after SB 189 was passed. And, my question is to Member Gazal's point about funding. How much money did the Secretary of State, Ms. Marks, request from the legislature to cure this issue?
How much money did the Secretary of State's office designate to get a new freaking system with this vendor bill? I mean, it's so frustrating. I'm with Member Grubbs here. We got to get Sally on the show as well. it's so frustrating. Somebody has to step in. And if it's not going to be the state election board stepping in, it's definitely not going to be the Secretary of State. Who do we go to next? The FBI, Department of Justice again? I mean, what are we doing here?
To cure this issue, he actually told them he didn't want it funded. He told them in 2025 that that he thought this was $60 million should not be spent, and that instead they should move that money to Hurricane Helene recovery. And of course, he didn't ask for it to be spent this year. And you know, as we really look at what it would have required, it would have required a whole, to meet SB 189, it would have required an entirely new voting system, which would have been more than the 60 million that he estimated. So yes, we've got a long-term problem, and moving the dates of SB 189, and this is the important thing that so many members of the public and press don't understand, moving the date of SB 189 really does almost nothing. It does very little for anyone, because we have, as Rob pointed out again, ongoing chronic violations of law that this board is obliged to confront and deal with and find solutions for.
Mr. McGuire, does the inaction or failure on behalf of the legislature to quote unquote fix this issue, does that absolve us from our responsibility in rulemaking?
No. No. The board has a duty to ensure compliance with law as it is currently, and so the legislature's failure to change the law in any way doesn't change the board's duty.
I mean, what are we just gonna sit here and continue to look at our watch, say, all right, Secretary of State, what are you guys gonna do? You gonna fix this problem? All right, it's June 30th. What are you guys doing? Somebody's got to step in. I said this to Janelle last week. I was like, we gotta figure this out. It's time for someone to take over. And we're actually going to get into a second to the final vote and what was decided by the board in this case, where it's interesting to see. And we'll have to talk to Kelvin and Janelle about this tomorrow, because there's clearly some division on the state election board when it comes to this issue. And it's something that needs to be addressed and talked about, because sitting on our hands and waiting on the Secretary of State or someone who we feel like has the legal ability or obligation to do this is not why the board is here. And it's sad to see that some members don't see that. Thankfully, I think the board's at a good place to where we have enough. Well, I don't want to offend anybody. We already have enough people who understand what the role of the board is in this case than not. So let me know what you guys think in the comments in the chat. Oh, this is so frustrating. We have the Honorable Attorney Kel Bell says the law is the law, right? And then there's silence. What are you doing here? What is the board there for if not to enforce the law? Ah, man. All right, we're going to move forward and we're going to get into the interesting part where the vote goes down. Let me double check and see. I think one of the biggest issues we're seeing here is I hear a lot of fear. And a lot of people, even though we've heard from senators in certain cases, Raphael Warnock, we've heard from Stacey Abrams, people are just like, let's just leave it the way it is. It's fine. We don't need to change anything. When that's clearly not the case, and the evidence shows something different. Let's go ahead and get into this. Let me see. All right. So now we're going to hear from the state election board, and they're actually going to vote on what's going to happen moving forward with the paper ballots and with the hand counts specifically. All right. So let's go ahead and get into the special meeting from the state election board and see what they have to say and the decision moving forward.
Or anything. All I'm saying is what is in this book is the law as we sit right now. It doesn't matter what the legislature did or did not do. We have an obligation to comply with the law, and we have the obligation to write rules that are in accordance with law. And I'm not hearing, I mean, you know, I agree with Dr. Johnston. As a side note, I'm so thankful that the Senate did not take up 214. And I would be remiss if I also didn't say that there were quite a few representatives who reached out to me that were glad that it did not pass and that it did not resolve the issue. So I don't really think we need to get into an argument over the House versus the Senate. We have lawmakers that work very hard at their jobs and doing all the things, but that doesn't absolve us of our responsibility.
Talk to them, Sally.
Well, I think that's where we disagree because I think it's their responsibility to fix this issue.
Oh,
So
my
they're going to write the
gosh.
rules on how to conduct elections?
They're going to create laws that that aren't in conflict, and they're going to create laws that yeah.
Okay.
Well, I would propose, just like speaking to the election directors earlier today, that we as a board should anticipate that SB 189 will stand, and we should get to work ourselves and not rely on petitions necessarily from outside. Although I like things in Ms. Mark's petition very, very much. But the board has some work to do, perhaps, to anticipate July 1st. And I think we should get down to work on that in anticipation of that. So, I mean, I would propose a rule working group, with the state election board members to address this.
I would not be opposed to that.
I agree with that.
Mm-hmm.
Member Exalt, do you have any comments to make on that?
I am always prepared to make sure that the counties have the support and guidance they need to comply with the law.
Yep. And Dr. Johnson, I've told you before that I'm full agreement that the counties need to be prepared one way or the other for this. So,
yeah.
Any further comments?
So I guess you're waiting for a motion. Let me hypothetically state a motion, and then if I'm wording it correctly, then we can go off of that. I would make a motion that state election board members work with Ms. Marks in her petition as a working group. I'm happy to assist where I can, and that this petition be heard after getting together and making refinements to the petition using the date of April the 8th as the petition date, and that we get together next week in another meeting to vote on the rule petition. Does that sound feasible?
Well, I think that you can make the amendment that, or make the motion that we put together a group to work with Ms. Marks on this. I would like to look at the dates for the meeting. I'll let y'all know later my availability. I don't want to do that in the public. So,
okay.
My question is, Sally, this petition will change by having two sentences removed from it, and perhaps some of the individual wording and director in the rule conducting elections. Is that enough of a change that it should be submitted again as a petition?
well, I think Member King had also asked about some further stuff being added to it, some further explanation.
Mm-hmm.
So there's, it seems like there's a lot to be removed and added to this.
Yeah, I would just like to explain where it says like cybersecurity controls, ballot accounting, things of that nature, stuff that can be questioned. I would like to have some, it doesn't have to be a full, explanation, but just a little bit of a summary of what that means so that it can't be challenged by, for having a lack of understanding.
I can appreciate that.
Ms. Marks?
Yes, I didn't know whether I should speak or not. Certainly, Member King, I can get to work on that tonight or tomorrow morning. And then it would be great to, if I could give you a call and maybe you could give me some of the scope of things that you're thinking about so that I don't miss any of them. Because you're right, we don't have a lot of time for iterations of this, given your June 3rd meeting is going to be a really, hard date for you to have, to be able to make a firm decision. If you initiate in rulemaking, it's pretty much going to have to be decided for initiation of rulemaking by Thursday or so of next week.
May
3rd. The meeting.
May 3rd.
Oh yeah, she said June 3rd.
May 3rd would be the day. Well, that would be the date you have to deliver it to the.
That's a date that we have to initiate rulemaking in order to hear for the June 3rd meeting.
See, I'm sorry. I thought it was a 30-day delivery period from the date you delivered it to Ledge Council to your meeting date.
Now, my
But-
understanding is that you have 30 days after you initiate rulemaking procedures.
Okay, could we ask Ms. Young just to make sure about that so that we don't, I mean, I'd love to have more time. That would be great, but I just didn't want to miss. Last time we did this, it took your staff a little bit of time to put together all the formalities and walk it over to Ledge Council. Ms.
Beth,
Young, you know the
initiate
question
rulemaking
I'm
procedures.
asking?
So I'm a little confused about exactly what the timing that you're talking about is. Legislative council, that 30-day window starts from when the board proposes a rule. So that 30 days hasn't begun to run yet.
Right, and that's
because there's not a rule that's been voted on by the board. So
right. I think what we were
proposed by
trying
the board.
to do, Ms. Young, is to back up from, they have a June 3rd date right now on the calendar that would perhaps be the date that they would adopt this as a rule. Therefore, backing up from that, what is the date that it has to get to Ledge Council in order to have what's it? And I thought it was 30 days there.
So right, that would be 30 dadays before a final vote. So if there were to be a final vote on the 3rd, you would back calculate it, and let's see, 30 days, September. So it's a 31-day month. So you would have to by May 2nd. Am I doing that right? Would have to get that to Legislative Council.
And I was just thinking, you know, if you try to do it that same day, your staff's going to have to be really ready.
No, I'm sorry. I think you'd have until May 4th. I was doing it backwards. I would always encourage, you know, y'all to not cut things quite so closely. If you're going to do that way, I'd say calendar for, you know, 31 days maybe, but 30 days is a minimum for notice to the public and for Legislative Council. There are public comment provisions that apply as well. 5013-4 is the applicable code section that y'all need to watch out for in that regard.
So it kind of seems like it really needs to happen next week. And if it were to be Friday, that's going to be cutting it close unless
Right,
we can help them over the weekend.
I would encourage everybody to look at the at 5013-4 because there's the requirements are pretty strict in terms of having to have the exact language of the rule and a synopsis of that rule. So I would encourage everybody to take a look at that. If the board is going to propose a rule, to look at that in connection with drafting that.
From my perspective, the questions I have is based on the way the rule is written as is. But if it changes and some of these things are pulled out, then I won't need, you know, there will be no need for clarification too. So I don't want to create extra work. And I guess my point is that I just want to make sure that I fully understand how this is going to roll out and that it's clear in the rule that is submitted for a final approval.
Okay. May I call you tomorrow for you to maybe go over some of the details of that with me so I'm real clear on what to do?
Yes.
Thank you.
I know my schedule's a little wild tomorrow, but we'll see how we make it work.
Okay, I'll give it a try.
So what's your motion, Member Grubbs?
Okay, so my motion would be pending clarification with the working group, which I'm happy to be part of. Definitely Ms. Marks and Ms. King and Member Johnson, Ms. Gazal, do you want to be part of those conversations?
That becomes an official meeting.
I'm sorry?
More than two members becomes an official meeting.
Yeah, right.
Notice and comment.
Be careful about that.
Right, that's why I'm checking. So you and Ms. King and Ms. Marks?
I was thinking, I would like to, I don't know if we are going to just resubmit this rule, or if the SEB is going to take some of it and create a rule. Like I'm a little unclear on that.
That's a great question. Thank you,
like,
Janelle.
I don't know, Dr. Johnson, correct me if I'm wrong, but it sounds like you wish to have a working group that's a SEB group that's internal versus putting together a group that is like Marilyn Marks's group. And I guess I'm a little confused. What type of group are we talking about? One that's at the outside where we're just working with CCG, or are we doing this internally?
Oh, well, my thought was a rule working group that would address all of the aspects of a SB 189 and its implementation. I mean, Ms. Marks has zeroed in on definition of a vote and conducting elections, but perhaps there are more areas that need to be addressed, and that I would want to elicit the input from legal and other voices for possible rules if we're indeed moving to implementation of SB 189.
Yeah, the
But
county-
we're just
the county-
addressing this petition though.
Right. This is just addressing the petition. Then perhaps Ms. Grubbs and Ms. King can just address this petition.
Well,
Okay.
would this petition be overrode if we present another petition that has the details and implementing 189?
Marilyn?
Thank you. Member King, I think what we can do is keep the CGG petition general enough and still appropriate and workable, so that if you want to come along behind a week or 2 or 3 later with much more specifics, that there won't be any conflict. I think we
So
can
what
do
would be
that.
the purpose of this petition if we're gonna
To get the big picture essential stuff going. And again, we're trying to make sure that the counties get as much notice as possible of any changes they need to make. And every day that ticks by is a precious day for them. So therefore,
true.
I'm urging that you all get all of the bare bones, the essential that's needed, so that they know which way they're headed. Do that, as soon as possible. Let's get something nailed down next week so that you can vote on it on June the 3rd. If there are more details, like, okay, how do you reconcile the ballot scan number with the number of ballots in the ballot box, or details like that, they can probably wait a week or 2 beyond that. They can wait a bit beyond that, because your election boards need to know the direction they're heading. They need to know that they're going to be able to, or need to get ballot on demand printer procurement, that sort of thing, before they need to worry about how to put the ballots in the folder to count them at the end of the night.
Well, see, that's where I disagree. I think we need to, I don't want to convolute it. I'm not really a fan of passing 2 separate petitions that essentially directs the counties to do the same thing. I feel like we can come, I would like to support one petition that outlines how the counties will implement 189 in one petition. That way they're not confused. So I don't necessarily agree with passing a petition just to kind of like say we passed the petition, and then there's no definition or there's nothing in it that actually guides the counties towards what they should be doing. I feel like that will do exactly what you're trying to prevent, which is stalling and kind of dragging it on.
Right. Okay. Let me try this. Of course, we could go on with details for 10 weeks in terms of if we just kept digging and digging. How about we do this? We get to work quickly. I'll get to work first thing in the morning, get to work quickly, cover as much territory as we think is reasonable in the available time. You all have a meeting next week to consider initiating rulemaking on as absolutely far as we can get between now and your meeting time, and see where we are at that point. And given the urgency of the time involved, to try to meet your June 3rd meeting date. It's so critical, and your election directors and boards clearly need to know where you're headed here. So let's get as much as we can accomplish. And then if you still see some holes, maybe you can follow on in the next several days behind that. But I don't know that we'll ever get to a point of saying, okay, we're now 100% complete with everything we need to know. Let's get as far.
Yeah. And again, shout out to Janelle for
as we can.
Just not wanting to do the back and forth. We're going to talk about it tomorrow. Make sure you guys tune in for the interview with Kelvin King and Janelle King tomorrow. It's going to be an interesting conversation. We'll see where we're at with voting in Georgia. And a lot of this is going to affect the nation. So make sure y'all stay tuned. Shout out to the gang, man. I could go on and watch that entire meeting, which I have watched most of it, to be honest. It's going to be interesting to see what happens. I'd love to hear from y'all in the comments. What's going on in your own counties? Do you guys use hand paper ballots? Are you hand counting? Do you have a voting system? What does your voting system look like? I'd love for y'all to let me know in the comments in the chat. Thank you to everybody who supported the show today. Big shout out to Mr. Charles Rambos for stopping by the show. Great interview. Shout out to my beautiful, awesome, amazing Amy E. Not only for everything that she does, but supporting and dropping the memberships as well. We're going to be back in here tomorrow for a big show, so make sure y'all tune in. I'm looking forward to it. As always, y'all know what to do. Subscribe, hit the notification bell so you don't miss any time that we go live. And of course, keep growing, keep pushing, keep it classy. We go.